Welcome back to CryptoWise. What is up, my friends? Today is a very special day.
Very special day. Today's like Christmas morning for Polkadot fans, and Marvin and I are die-hard Polkadot fans.
It is more than Christmas morning. It is almost like the Super Bowl meets Christmas all on the same day.
If the Super Bowl at Christmas had a baby, that's today. It's the first day officially. The first Polkadot Parachain auction is going to start in a couple hours, and we have Joe Petrowski on today, so this is must watch. Must watch.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking everything Polkadot today, ladies and gentlemen. And a special welcome to the entire CryptoWise family. Thank you so much for joining us here today. If you haven't already, please do us a huge favor and smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel and click on that little bell so you can get real-time alerts when we drop live. Milton, are you as excited as I am?
Oh, no. I am way more excited than you. You know me.
I didn't sleep last night.
Learning stuff. And today, I love when we have this really smart geniuses that are building the future on our show, because it makes me feel so much smarter after we end the interview.
It makes you feel smarter. I feel dumber. I mean, I have more knowledge after the interview, but I just feel like, geez, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, that's true, actually. It's a bit of both. But like literally, Joe, like having Joe on, he's part of, like, he's on the inside. He's in the clique of the cliques of people who are building Polkadot, building Parity, building Web3. These guys are building the future, and we get to talk to them. So I'm so excited about that.
Not only do we get to talk to them, we get to talk to them today.
Yeah, and the CryptoWisers out there get to listen and get these gems of wisdom from these geniuses. It's amazing. And did you see that Binance finally announced the volume of
I saw that.
Okay, so like we've been going to Dot Market Cap every day, checking like what's going on with the crowd loans.
This was like right out of left field. People thought they were pre-connected.
Yeah, and Akala was in first place by a ton, and then Binance was a bit delayed in announcing their numbers, and boom, Moonbeam, just like that. Mm-hmm. Boom, Moonbeam and Akala are out. They are fighting this out for this first parachain. This is insane. Okay, Moonbeam has 17.5 million Polkadot locked in. We're talking about locked in for almost 2 years.
Is that it?
And then Akala, 15.7 million. And then we have a bunch of others that have over 1 million. So this is insane. But Moonbeam is now in first place. They are in the lead to get this first parachain. This is exciting. This stuff is
super exciting.
Yeah.
But it also might change the decision for some people that were just waiting for today or this next couple days to jump in last minute. It might change their decision to see that volume jump in that direction at the same time as to what projects they're going to contribute to.
Yeah. So guys, okay, if you're listening right now, this is how it works. Okay. So it's a candle auction. So what that means is there's a 7-day period that starts today, and it starts in a couple hours, where the auction can end at any time. And so the groups don't know when it's going to end. No one knows. It just is randomly picked. And whoever's in the lead when that happens gets the parachain. But that doesn't actually start for another 2 days or so. So the first couple of days, I forget the exact number. It's like 48 hours. It's like 40 something hours. You know for sure that the candle auction won't end. So you guys have 2 days for sure that you can get into the crowd loans, knowing that you'll be part of the parachain if it gets chosen. After day 3, it's whenever that candle auction ends, is whoever was in the crowd loan before that, that's who's in.
Very, very exciting stuff here, Milt. Very exciting stuff. Before we bring in our special guest, can we take a quick look at the market?
All right, quick, because I want to talk to Joe. I want to talk to Joe.
I know. We all want to talk to Joe, but a lot of stuff was happening over the last 24 hours since we've been live here, okay? There was a lot of fear in the market last night. We saw some bleeding. Bitcoin did drop. The candlestick went all the way back down to 62, and it created some fear. Ethereum at 47.5. We got BNB at 628. Solana at 241. Cardano $2.11, and our beloved Polkadot at 48.42.
And Dot did dip down. I saw it at like 44.
I actually added. So
did you add more?
I did. I
didn't know I didn't know it was possible to add any more Dot than you have in your bags.
My portfolio is now 78% Dot, my friend.
That was a nice little dip for people to get in though on DOT who hadn't been in yet.
Yeah. So anyways, guys, if you do have any DGen altcoin questions, save them till after. We might be able to get to them after we talk to our very special guest.
Yeah, guys, take your notepads out, put your smart caps on, whatever that is, because we're talking to someone here who knows this stuff. Okay, we're not fooling around today. Okay, we're bringing in one of the smartest guys here in Polkadot. He works for the Web3 Foundation. Let me get his actual title here because his title is pretty impressive. He's the Technical Integrations Lead for Web3. And we're going to find out exactly what that means. But welcome to the show, Mr. Joe Petrowski.
Hi, thanks. You guys certainly bring a lot of energy to the introduction.
We bring the energy because that's all we get to bring. You bring the wisdom, we'll bring the energy. All right, Joe. So let's talk. I want to go to the beginning. So just before we went on air, you said that you've been part of Polkadot here for about 3 years. Let us in on the journey here. When did you first hear about it, and what was it about Polkadot that made you say, "Yeah, this is what I want to spend all my time building"?
Yeah, so I kind of first heard about it, I think in like 2017 or 18. I guess 18 is when I got kind of serious about it and ended up applying for a job at Parity, and I started working there almost exactly 3 years ago. And actually, the Polkadot code base is almost exactly 4 years old today. So I've been with the project for about 3 of the 4 years that it's existed. So it's been pretty exciting. Prior to that, I was doing like a bunch of side projects. I was working on some like trading algorithms and other type of stuff, and just wanted to focus more on like actual protocol development rather than trading, and kind of get into like building the actual future of the web and like the core technology stack. And I just thought Polkadot was really interesting because there were a lot of like smart contract platforms coming out, and Ethereum was kind of already doing the smart contract thing, and Ethereum was kind of like the next logical step after Bitcoin. So if you take Bitcoin and say like, well, let's have some kind of like logic layer on top of this, then you get Ethereum, and a bunch of other stuff came out that was kind of like an evolution on that. Like Ethereum was kind of like the first smart contract platform, and of course, the first time you build something, you make mistakes, and so all the stuff like Ethereum is slow and everything. That's not really news today, and so a bunch of other projects were kind of building like other smart contract platforms, but that was still kind of like an evolutionary step. Like, okay, let's take this model of smart contracts and make it a little bit better. Whereas Polkadot was kind of like the next, more of like a revolutionary step in like, what's the next level beyond smart contracts? How do we abstract this even more? So rather than like abstracting a program onto a blockchain, how do we actually abstract a blockchain onto a blockchain? And I think that's what's really unique about Polkadot. There's not really like a direct competitor to it, in the fact that like nobody else is really doing exactly what Polkadot is doing. So I thought that was interesting, and of course like Gavin's track record and just the resources and ability to build something so ambitious and interesting from a really like first principles approach, rather than just trying to like optimize or kind of like create like evolutions on things that already exist. Was like just quite exciting to me, and so
that's awesome. Yeah. So I'll give us a sense of what Polkadot was at that time. So this is 3 years ago. You're applying to Web3, which is their foundation. So how big was the team at that point? Where was it just an idea? Did it all have to be built out, or had they built a kind of framework that you were kind of building onto? Maybe give us an inside look, a behind the curtains kind of look at what Polkadot was like back then and how it's kind of grown to where we're launching the first auction today.
Yeah, so it's changed a lot. Like back in 2018, I actually applied to Parity, and I switched to Web3, the foundation, about a year ago, just as part of like kind of growing role stuff, and my role kind of changed a little bit in what I was doing. But back then, I think Parity was around like 50 or 60 people. The foundation was still very new. And I think now probably Parity is close to 200 people, and Web3 I think is like 50 or 60 people. So it's grown multiple factors, 5 or 6x of what it was before. And the tech stack back at that time, we did have like Polkadot and Substrate. And I don't know if people are familiar with Substrate at all, but that's maybe like something we can dive into.
Yeah, I want to talk. Yeah, I want to dive into that. But yeah, keep going with what you're talking about, and we'll talk about Substrate a bit in a bit more detail afterwards.
Yeah, so when I first joined, we actually didn't have like a Substrate released. So now if you look at like Substrate, I think it's on like Substrate 3.0, and there may have been some talk of like a 4.0 or something. Some of the versioning stuff is getting a little bit difficult, how it relates to parachains and stuff. But when I started, it was like a version 0 point something. And like I actually wrote a lot of the early documentation for like what became Substrate 1.0. So it was really just kind of like a sketch of like the early software framework that we'd be using. And then on the Polkadot side, we did have some test nets that would kind of like create blocks, and they had some like really basic transactions, like some primitive like governance and staking stuff. You could like run a validator on a test net type of thing, but it didn't have anything about like parachains or cross-chain messaging or anything like that. And I think we were on like maybe like the third or fourth iteration of a test net. It was called like Alexander or something. All these test nets were actually named after like Berlin subway stations. So there was like Kruma Lanka awesome. And Alexander Platz. So yeah, we had
and our sense of Polkadot is like obviously Gavin Wood is kind of the face, and he's the person that we think about most. And is that true? Like, is he really kind of like within the Polkadot circle? Is he clearly the leader, or are there kind of multiple leaders that are really building this?
Yeah, so he's probably the most visible, but there's quite a lot of leaders, and Polkadot, especially like if you compare it to something like Ethereum, it's so massively complex that I don't think any one person can actually understand it. So
right.
You just kind of like look at the timeline of it, right? Like if you look at like how Ethereum was developed, that's some like, you know, Vitalik had this white paper, and Gav kind of like formalized it into the yellow paper and coded it up over like Christmas break, basically. Like, you know, had like a week off from work and like coded the first version of like an Ethereum client. And that was it, right? And for Polkadot, it took us like 3 years of development in order to launch, like 3 years of development with like a, you know, 50 to 100 person development team in order to launch the early version of the relay chain on Polkadot. Like, so much bigger.
I've heard that many times before. And, you know, for people new to crypto that are just coming in over the last few weeks, last few months, Polkadot is now on their radar. A lot of them don't know that Gavin was a part of Ethereum.
Yeah. So I guess like to answer your original question, like Gav does do a lot of the like governance stuff and kind of like a lot of like overall design stuff, but there's a lot of stuff, especially around like consensus and networking, that we have teams on, and it's definitely a team effort, and there's a lot of people leading different stuff, whether it's like consensus, networking, parachains, bridges, cross-chain messaging, all of these things have, and I'm definitely missing a lot of people. So sorry if I'm missing your group. There's so many. It's definitely like a huge team working on like various components of this.
Okay, so maybe let's spend really just quickly, very quickly. Let's explain, because we do talk about these terms often because we talk about Polkadot a lot. I just want to get your explanation for exactly what these different elements are. So we have Polkadot and Kusama. They are the decentralized networks, but then we have Substrate, as you mentioned, we have Parity, and we have Web3. These are terms that we talk a lot about as kind of three major elements of Polkadot. Can you just tell us very quickly, what is Parity, what is Substrate, and then what is the Web3 Foundation, which you work for technically?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually answer those in reverse order. So Web3 is a foundation dedicated to the advancement of decentralized technology. Yeah, so that's the website you're showing. That's pretty much it. So Polkadot is like the big project that we kind of steward or like want to succeed. But we also do quite a lot of research into like zero knowledge cryptography and networking, and lots of other like just core, very low level technology that will be building blocks for like a decentralized web and decentralized applications that don't necessarily even have to be built on blockchain. And we work with a ton of different teams, like especially through like the Web3 grants program, in order to build out like the Polkadot network. So Parity is kind of like the most maybe well-known builder of like the client that like a validator runs, or like a full node would run on Polkadot. But there are actually 2 or 3 other projects who are building client implementations. And there's like tons of teams who are building like wallets and other infrastructure like block explorers, node hosting services like for RPCs, yeah, wallets, dashboards, data, crowd loan dashboards, all of this stuff. Like it takes tons of infrastructure to actually run a blockchain network, not just a full node. And actually, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to discuss along those lines about like what the future infrastructure and tooling requirements are, because Polkadot really changes a lot of the paradigms that people have been building in, and a lot of things that work like on Ethereum or Bitcoin actually won't work in the future. And then so Parity is mostly like a development shop. They do a lot of like the engineering and development work, and actually like turn, say, like an idea like that might come out of Web3 Foundation of like, this is how this protocol should work, and here's like maybe a proof of concept of it, and Parity turns that into like production usable software that would be like an end product. And so Parity does like a lot of like the core work on like implementing the protocols. And finally, Substrate is a blockchain building framework. So Substrate actually came after Polkadot. So after we started working on Polkadot, we kind of realized, well, okay, the core thesis of this is that people are going to build all these parachains to connect to it. And so if we have to like do all this work to build Polkadot, it's kind of silly for people to replicate all this work to build parachains. We should kind of like abstract this out into a framework to actually build blockchains. And so that's what Substrate is. Like Substrate is kind of a toolkit in order to build a custom blockchain, and like then connect that as a parachain. So, and you can also run like a standalone Substrate chain. It doesn't have to be a parachain. They work completely fine on their own. Actually, Polkadot is built with Substrate itself, but it's also a toolkit that you can use to build a parachain if that's the route that you want to go down.
So you would would Substrate, obviously it's very different, but if you were comparing it to other chains, it would be, say, what we like Solidity on Ethereum is the language that you kind of code the smart contracts for Ethereum. Substrate is essentially the language, even though it's a framework. Is that kind of the same thing, that it's the language that that you use to build on Polkadot?
Yeah, but instead of building a smart contract, you're actually building a blockchain itself.
Oh, okay. So I want to talk about this kind of parachain. We talk about the parachains a lot on the channel, and I've done a bunch of videos trying to explain to people about Polkadot as a layer 0, Kusama as a layer 0, and that all these parachains that are going to be connecting to the relay chain are in themselves layer 1 blockchains. So I just want to talk about this in general, because when we're talking about these crowd loans, these auctions that are starting, this is for these projects to land a parachain, which essentially would mean that they get to basically launch their own layer 1 blockchain and connect it to Polkadot or Kusama, and that becomes a thing. So we've talked about a lot of the different projects that we like, but from a kind of like Polkadot, when you guys were imagining this and building this out, what's the difference between the projects that it makes sense for them to have their own parachain versus kind of the dapps that we know that are just building on blockchains? So like, for example, like when Akala gets their parachain, I imagine there's going to be all sorts of dapps that end up building on Akala. So like, what are the ideas? What are the big ideas that you think warrant a parachain? Yeah. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, and I actually think there's multiple different answers to it. There's a lot of different angles you can kind of come at this from. So I think first I would just back up to like the idea of Polkadot and Substrate in general, which kind of redefines a blockchain. So rather than looking at it as like transactions or something, or like specific logic, like, and even like smart contract, like the EVM is like a specific interface. So like if you look at Ethereum, like the EVM is a specific interface to build smart contracts on top of. And what we did was actually back up like a step away from that and say, okay, what is a blockchain? you have some database, and then you have a block, which is a list of state transitions. And then after you apply those transitions, you have a new database. And so what is a block? It's just, it has a header, like some contextual information that might be like a block number, a parent block hash, and like a storage root. And then you have a list of transactions that are in the block. And so at the substrate layer, it actually doesn't care what those transactions are or what kind of information you store in that database. It's completely agnostic as to whether you have an EVM on your chain and you store smart contracts in your database and let people access them by executing them. It doesn't care if you don't have smart contracts. And for example, the first parachain we launched on Kusama is called StateMine, and it's specifically for assets, fungible and non-fungible assets. So it just keeps a database of like an asset registry and who owns them, and provides an interface to like transfer them, but it doesn't have any smart contracts or anything like that. And so the array, or like the list of transactions in a block on StateMine, is going to be completely different from an array of transactions in a smart contract chain like Moonriver. But at a fundamental level, they have some database, and they have a list of transitions that apply changes to that database. So it has like complete flexibility around like what kind of information you want to store and place in that database, and what kind of logic you want to have to actually manipulate that information, and how you want to let users interact with that database. And so when it comes to like, well, would I use a smart contract on some blockchain, or would I like want to develop a parachain? It really comes down a lot to like what kind of logic you actually want to execute and what your needs are. So I think a lot of projects will actually start out as a smart contract, but find that like it's not super efficient, and they have enough like user demand and traction to actually warrant like a dedicated parachain slot. A parachain slot you could almost think of as like a dedicated CPU core, whereas like on a parachain, like everybody who's using that parachain has to kind of like share the space in the block in order to access transactions there. Whereas if you have your own parachain for the application, you just have like a dedicated core running that application. Smart contracts still play a big role, and I think a lot of this comes into like logic. And so, for example, one of the things that like I think even like someone who's new to blockchain would kind of know about smart contracts and gas metering is that like the whole gas metering thing exists so that somebody can't put a smart contract with an infinite loop that would just make the chain stop and prevent it from advancing. It would just run out of gas in that transaction, and that's great. But the problem with that is like if you look at something like an ERC20 token transfer, one of these transactions to like transfer an ERC20 token has been done probably tens of millions of times. And so we can look at the logic in that contract, and by inspection, we can just say, look, there's no infinite loop in this transaction. It contains this number of database reads, this number of database writes, a little bit of logic. There's not even a loop in it. We don't have to meter this every time because we kind of know, we can see how much it cost. We have 10 million examples of how much gas it used. How come we have to still meter this every single time and go through the overhead of gas metering on a smart contract platform, when if you have a parachain, you can just put that logic directly in the parachain, and you can just take a transaction fee for it, and then you just execute the transaction without any kind of like metering or anything. So it becomes a lot more efficient. And so in that kind of like view of things, it actually makes smart contracts very specialized in one thing, which is allowing people, untrusted people, to deploy untrusted code on a blockchain. And that's obviously really useful. We want anybody to be able to deploy anything in Web3. But if you have some application where you're like, I wrote this application, I know that it doesn't have any infinite loops in it, and I want to like deploy this as a parachain, I can run it a lot more efficiently, and I don't need to like go through all the like gas metering and like sharing this chain with other people. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And so the number that we hear thrown around for the parachains is 100, and I'm not sure if that's like an official number, but where did that, if that is an official number, was that based on we think the relay chain can handle 100, or was it like we think 100 is what we'll need and there won't really be that many more sort of projects that would need a parachain?
Yeah, so that, I mean, there is no official number. That's kind of a cool thing about Polkadot, is that the logic all exists on chain. So that's kind of where the meta protocol term comes from, is that it actually hosts its own logic. And so it can go right in the logic itself, like how many parachains it's going to host. From about like 3 or 4 years ago, our early estimates was that it could support about 100 parachains, and the main constraint was actually networking stuff. So like the validators have to kind of pass around a lot of information about all the parachains that they're validating, and there wasn't anything about like computer speed or like transaction execution or anything like that was a limiter. It was really just like networking, like how much data can we send between however many number of validators that we need. And that was kind of like an early guess as to what the network could support. But with some of like a lot of our latest work, we actually think within a couple of years, this could support several thousand parachains.
Wow. And so I want to talk a little bit about the interoperability aspect of it, because obviously this is a huge kind of part of the design, is that all the parachains will be able to connect and talk to each other, message each other, and work kind of interoperably. But we're also seeing with a project with like Moonbeam, the big thing about Moonbeam and Moonriver on Kusama is that they are EVM compatible. And so we're seeing a lot of projects that launched on Ethereum launch on Moonbeam. But do you see in the future, like bring us into like what you see the future being of interoperability? If we have Polkadot out there with, hundreds or thousands of parachains, and then we've got Kusama also with, however many parachains, and they're all talking to each other. But we also have the EVM compatibility. So I guess that brings in any of the kind of Ethereum-based EVM blockchains. What about other blockchains like Solana or Cosmos or Luna? Like, when you imagine the future of blockchain, how many of these separate networks outside of Polkadot do you think will exist? And do you think Polkadot will just be able to interact with all of those somehow through different parachains, focusing on making that possible?
Yeah, so I view this very similar to operating systems. So I would expect, just like there is Windows, Mac, and Linux, I would expect, say, 3 to 10 major ecosystems kind of emerge as the primary blockchain ecosystems. And I would expect others to kind of either join into those ecosystems or kind of fizzle off. And the core thesis behind that is just that the value in these networks is kind of like the trust in these networks is related to their security, right? If you transact on a blockchain and you don't really trust that block is final, it's not a very valuable blockchain to use. And when we think of security, think about it in a lot of ways, but it's always a finite resource. So if you kind of just forget about blockchain and think about like Web2 security, it's what is like the physical security of like the data center premises, how strong are the passwords that like control the database and stuff like this. And obviously like password strength is finite, right? Like you only have so many characters. It might take 1 trillion years to guess, but like somebody could actually guess a password to a, Twitter's database or something. And worst case is it's like a admin type of password thing. And then if you move into like proof of work, which is like the first iteration of blockchain security, this is just based on like CPU power, and the number of CPUs in the world is finite. So if you start to add more and more blockchains that are based on proof of work, then you just basically dilute the security. And we kind of see this like when like new proof of work blockchains launched like in the years kind of after Bitcoin and Ethereum, they all used like some special hash algorithm that was like not compatible with SHA-256 ASICs, because they knew that like a very small mining pool from Bitcoin could just completely like 51% attack their little chain if it didn't have enough security. And if you kind of move into proof of stake, these are secured by value and like the desire not to lose value. And value is just by definition a scarce resource. Like if it's not scarce, it's not valuable. And so you kind of have like a finite amount of resources, whether it's value in proof of stake or CPUs in proof of work, that are securing all of the blockchains or all of the blockchain networks in the world. And if you start to add like thousands of blockchains, you basically are going to dilute these blockchains, and they end up becoming very competitive. So you kind of end up with like, if you have like a dominant blockchain ecosystem, anytime a competitor comes up who is like 10 times smaller, it would be very much like Facebook acquiring its competition before they become too big. It would be like in the incumbents blockchain's interest to attack the up and coming blockchains before they get too big.
And what's so, it? And part of I guess the battle to be one of these networks that is going to survive the test of time is also brain power, because that's finite. The amount of people out there like you who actually have the capability of building these things. What's that like behind the scenes in terms of the tribal kind of competition between networks for like? There must be like, do you talk to a lot of the other people building on, say, Solana or building on Cosmos? And are you always trying to, bring those people over to Polkadot? What's that like, the competition between trying to get the best and smartest minds in computer science over to Polkadot instead of the other ones?
Oh, I mean, I think it's still very much aligned in the fact that like this is still a small industry. There's tons of room to grow, and I think most blockchain ecosystems should really be like more collaborative. Like, you know, the thing that we're trying to do is the same, right? Like we want to change this model of like the Google, Apple, Facebook type of monopolies in tech that kind of like run Web 2, and we want to do something better. And it would be kind of silly to like sabotage ourselves by like fighting over little things. I think like most of our objectives are quite aligned. So honestly, I don't think about it too much. There's an infinite amount of work to be done in order to build Web3, and I'm like honestly just too occupied working on building out the infrastructure for.
All right, fair enough. I had to ask you though. I do have kind of a question about the tokenomics here. We're not going to talk price, but just in terms of, so this is one thing that I thought about, because I have a lot of DOT and I was staking all my DOT, and then these auctions started and I started unstaking a bunch of my DOT. Was there anything in place there? Like, what if everyone just unstaked their DOT all at once to join the crowd loans? Then what would happen to the actual security of the network? How do we balance that enough DOT is staked to secure the network versus all the DOT that is going to be put into the parachain auctions?
Yeah, I mean, the network is kind of like the DOT staking mechanism is kind of set up to handle that, whereas we kind of like put in an initial like target as in like what's the optimal amount, like what's the optimal percentage of the network that should be staked. And I think it was like 50%. And if it drops too far below that, the staking rewards actually go up a lot for the people who are staking. So if it drops too low, then it would actually make more sense to stake rather than participate in crowd loans.
Right, but I guess, a lot of that, the crowd loan stuff is going to be locked up. It's not like we have access to it to kind of get it back and end up staking it if we've already put it into the crowd loan. Yeah,
I mean, I'd be surprised to see that much go into crowd loan. I think on Kusama, it's like 20% of the network. I mean, if that,
no, that's fine.
If the staking drops that much, then
right.
Yeah, that's an indication that I guess people want to use their token elsewhere.
And so we did have some questions about the staking reward. So it's so the amount of stakers, obviously, if there are more stakers, the rewards go down. What about, do the parachains affect that at all? If there are more parachains, will the staking rewards go down, or is that a completely separate situation?
No, so the ideal staking rate is actually related to the number of parachains. So I think when there are 0 parachains, the ideal staking rate is 75%, and when there are 100 parachains, the ideal staking rate is 50%. So the number of parachains kind of shifts the staking reward curve, but the actual rewards should stay relatively the same, like regardless of how many parachains are connected. It's much more related to the number or the percentage of the DOT that is staked in the network rather than the number of parachains that exist.
And in a way, parachains are a little bit like, this is how I think about it. Tell me if I'm crazy and totally down the wrong track. But we hear a lot about sharding as part of kind of Ethereum 2.0, and it feels a little bit like that, like that the parachain is specializing in different things. So basically, kind of putting all of kind of one type of thing into that parachain so that the rest of the other parachains aren't having to do that. So like something like NFTs, like a project that we love on the channel and are supporting is Unique Network, and they're going for Kusama. And we really think of them as kind of a big, NFT. Like that's what they're concentrated on, creating an NFT network within Polkadot. So explain to me kind of like how many, in your mind, like, is there room for an infinite amount of NFT parachains on Polkadot? Or would it be better to have everyone kind of consolidate into something, say either unique or affinity, and really make that the NFT hub of Polkadot?
Yeah, I mean, I hope there's infinite room, but this actually kind of goes back to your question about like, should I build an application on a parachain or should I build a parachain myself? And I think actually what I would like to see, so I think now when we look at like what happens now, people are like developers are used to building on one blockchain. Like they're used to building on Ethereum, and then they say, okay, I'm going to try out building on Polkadot. What I would like to see in like the 3 to 5 year time frame is that people kind of rethink their paradigm for how they develop Web3 applications, and they should actually be developing them across multiple chains. So if you kind of look at like an application that you would use on your phone from like Web2, you wouldn't say like I'm building my app on PayPal. Like that's ridiculous. You would have like log in with Google, fetch a ride with Uber, pay with PayPal, and you'd use all of these components, right, to build your application. And I actually think that blockchain applications should be built in a similar paradigm where like StateMine, for example, supports NFTs and fungible assets, but it only supports like these really low level data formats that says like, this is the set of information that represents an NFT. And it lets users like transfer them to somebody else, and it lets like an administrator kind of like mint or destroy new NFTs. But it doesn't have smart contracts. It doesn't have any kind of like specialized logic to like build a marketplace or like some other application on top of. But I think if you look at something in parallel, like a smart contract chain or like a unique chain, what you could actually do is say, okay, I'm going to keep my asset, my like actual like core representation of this NFT on StateMine because it's super fast. It can process, 1,000 NFT transfers per second or something like that. And so I'm going to leave my NFTs there and keep like kind of the ownership of them there. But then when I have like, I don't want to have like a custodian who's like a super user who can go like mint and destroy NFTs. I want that permission to be a smart contract. So I'm going to use a smart contract parachain, and I'm going to put a smart contract there that controls when an NFT is created or destroyed. And then like I don't want to build my marketplace in a smart contracts because they use a lot of like gas metering and they're kind of slow. So I'm going to use Unique Network or something to build my marketplace on. And then when you go actually use this application as a user, you're going to actually be interacting with like 3, maybe even more, like 10 parachains or something. So if you think about like an identity parachain, you could have like, well, I want to transfer this NFT, but I don't want to use like a 0x blah 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 type of address. Like I want to just type in like Joe and have this user come up, and I can get that from like a parachain that specializes in identity, right? And so I would actually kind of like challenge application developers to not just think about, oh, I'm going to build my application on this parachain, but rather think about how can I use all of these different chains in an ecosystem for what they're optimized for, and build an application on top of that, like using all these tools.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That actually clarifies a lot for me. Well, your time is not our friend. I could talk about this all day.
I'm getting smarter by the minute.
I do have one question though, because you did mention, okay, so you think that maybe, there's a finite amount of, CPU and all, and everything that you said about how many networks could exist. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, okay?
Uh-oh.
What do you think of Ethereum? Just between you and I, Joe. I won't tell anyone else. Just between you and I. You think Ethereum is going to be one of those networks, or is that technology just too old and we're going to see the newer ones take over?
That is a good question. I mean, Ethereum 2.0 kind of changes every week, and I'm not the most up to date on what the latest Ethereum 2.0 is. Yeah, I mean, I obviously have a lot of kind of like backing going just from like developer mindshare and application adoption. I really don't know. I I honestly think about it quite a lot, and I don't really know the answer to that. I would say like there's a lot of bad technology that still exists today, and that's not necessarily a reason that something will disappear.
Are you and Gavin tight? Do you guys hang out? Do you go out for coffees?
I mean, he doesn't live in the same area as me. I see him every now and then. But,
yeah, Marvin and I really want to be friends with Gavin.
Yeah,
but we also want to be friends with you.
We want to be friends with him.
Yeah, we want to be part of the clique. We're not
How
smart.
do we get into
We're not
the
smart
club?
at all, and we can't actually add anything of value. But can we be part of the Polkadot Club?
Is there an NFT that we need to gain access? We've got a cello brick. We've got a Substra Punk. What else do we need to gain access to this club?
I don't know if there's this Mamacita NFT out there now.
Oh boy, what? Mamacita? we gotta
find this thing. I want to
check that out. Is there any rift between Gavin and Vitalik, or are they still buds? What's going on there?
Oh, I have no idea.
All right, Joe. Well, thank you so much for your time. We're really excited today, guys.
So excited.
Today's Super Bowl day. It's Christmas Day for us Polkadot heads because is it weird also? I just got to ask this, Joe, before you leave. Is it weird? Because I know that you guys are just really like smart guys who are building the future, but you're kind of becoming kind of this like celebrity class. You got guys like Marvin, I hear, are just like fans.
I'd be asking for your autograph
of
if you were here in the
Polkadot and
studio.
stuff.
That's for damn
Is
sure.
it a bit weird? Like even in like we talked to Ingo here from Kilt and stuff. We're gonna have him on the show, and he's just this like brilliant computer scientist, but he's kind of like to us he's like a Beatle. He's one of the Beatles. Like, is that kind of weird that you guys are becoming the kind of the new celebrity class?
Nobody's asked me for my autograph yet.
Not yet, eh?
So
Wait for it.
I don't know if I'm quite in that class.
Have you been outside in the last 2 years?
Yeah, it's gonna be like Petrowski mania when you get outside. You don't know. All the fans are waiting. All right, Joe. Well, thanks so much. This has been a great chat. Hopefully, you'll come back again as Polkadot and stuff builds out. We're super excited. We're in on a ton of these projects. We love them. Polkadot is definitely our favorite network of the most, and we really appreciate your time, especially today, which is such a big milestone for Polkadot. In the first auction starting for the Parachain.
How much time is left? What are we down to? An hour and a half or something?
Probably something like that. I think 2 hours looks like.
2 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 hours. The countdown is here. Joe is in the house. Joe, thank you. We'd love to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a good chat and very exciting times.
Awesome.
Thanks, Joe.
Milton.
Oh, that was fun. Was that fun, Marv?
That was fun, man. Like, see, I got smarter.
I got smarter too.
Like the entire dot ecosystem, everything that they're doing is it's mind blowing, and it's tough. It's tough to understand all the intricacies, all the aspects of it, and so this was really helpful for me too.
Yeah, me too.
Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, the entire CryptoWise family. You guys are the best. You guys are the best. Make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click on that little bell. That bell will give you real-time alerts when we go live. As always, stay tuned for more here at CryptoWise. Thanks so much.